Hello students, today we're here at the Tablesaw going over the many things that are going to be on the safety test dealing with the Tablesaw. And the Tablesaw in general is a pretty safe tool to use, but a lot of accidents have happened in the past on table saws. Our Tablesaw is considered to be one of the safer ones because it's a saw stop. And also in this module or on this page you're going to see the saw stop videos that I suggest that you watch and look at. But realize not all saws are a saw stop, and they don't all stop cutting and emergency shut down when they're no longer cutting wood. In fact, most table saws out there aren't saw stops, so you want to follow all these safety rules even with the saw stop table saw. So in general we have a 6-inch margin of safety. So if we're cutting a board less than 6 inches in size, less than 6 inches wide, or down to less than 6 inches wide, we're going to be using our push sticks to kind of push it through with the proper hand and body position that we're using. Now to use the saw and to use it safely, I'm going to be switching the camera to some different views so you can see the different parts more closely than from this broad view that you have now. So the first thing to explain about the saw stop table saw has to do down here with the brain and the on and off switch that we have. So it actually has two on switches here on the table saw. The first one is the computer. And as we turn on the computer, you're going to see these lights go through a startup phase. That's when it's going to load the blade full of electrons. Okay, and then the big flipper here, this is the on by pulling it and off by pushing it off to the saw. The big off allows you to turn it off if you need to with your knee or other body part easily instead of going for a small switch. But we don't want to accidentally turn off the computer, because then we're turning off all the safeties. So as I flip on the computer, I'm going to see the lights go through the startup phase, and we're not able to use the saw unless it goes all the way to just solid green. So it's loading it with electrons, going through its checks, we're solid green, we're good to go. Then as I pull, it's going to turn the saw on, push it to turn it off. You can notice that it's going through a different set of checks while that blade's still spinning down, and we have to wait for it to go all the way back to solid green, which is now, before we could turn it on again. Now as you come up to use the table saw, you're going to need to set the blade sometimes. So down here, I've got a front wheel and a side wheel. The side wheel tilts the blade. We almost never do that. That's one that Mr. Tobler usually will help you with. But the front wheel we adjust all the time. So up here we got the guard. I'm going to lift it up. As I lift up the guard, you see the blade there underneath there. I'm going to take my board with the blade, with the saw turned off up here, and I'm going to check the height. Right now it's set pretty high. I want to have it 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch above the wood. Something about like that nature. So we see the blade just being a little bit above the wood. Now, I don't want you to set the guard up like this to do that. I'd rather just have you hold it up a little bit like this to check it if you feel like it needs to be checked. But normally in this class, we leave it set at that height, then we can cut almost everything that we need to cut. But we're going to shift around here, bring it around here to the side, lift it back up so we can talk about some of the other parts. Right here we have the splitter. The splitter, which is this metal piece behind the blade, that does a lot for our safety here. It keeps wood from getting on the back of the blade and then causing the blade to throw it for that reason. We also got some anti-kickback devices which work sometimes. We don't rely on them a whole lot, but if the board starts to go backwards, sometimes it'll catch the board and keep it from kind of being thrown. And then I got my guard here. Now my guard's going to hide the blade and see it, but it's also going to keep us safe. So in this class, we always use it, the saw stop table saw, with the guard on. So here at the table saw, we're going to talk a lot about proper hand and body position. I'm going to go ahead and make a cut for you to kind of see what I do, and then we'll talk about what that's kind of about. So this board we're going to cut down to 5.5 inches. So I'm going to set it to 5.5 inches here, lock down the fence. As I cut, that's going to be less than 6, so I'm going to need to have a push stick. I'll put my push stick right here ready to go. And I'm going to start and make the cut all the way through. Alright, so what did I do? Well, first thing I did was I had my body going this way. I want to have my body going this way to keep the board tight to the fence. Now my board is 13 inches long here. It's got to be a minimum of 12 to safely cut on the table saw. My longest edge is against the fence, so that is correct. My left hand, I take the thumb and I hold it down. My right hand, I push against the fence. I want to push against it this way so it stays tight to the fence all the way through the cut. So as I started the cut, I pushed it in and let it slide with my left hand here, letting it keep it tight to the fence until the end of the board here was on the table. Once the end is on the table, I hold it, not let go. I'm going to grab my push stick and put it about in the center. And I want it to tilt it slightly so it's pushing towards the fence. Then my left hand and my right push it through until my left hand can't help anymore because it's going near the guard, and that's what this red line reminds us of. So I pull the left hand out of the way, I shift my body so it's easy reach for my right hand to push past the splitter. Now normally we'd have a partner on that other side picking up the board for you. I'll reach across, which isn't a good thing, but I'll reach across and grab it since we have no partner there now. So now that you see that, let's demonstrate it one more time. We're going to cut it down to 5 1/4. I'll lock it in place, let it reach full speed. We'll shift it around and do it one more time from a different angle, more of a user angle, that you can see more of what I'm looking at as I run it from this side. So we'll go down to 5 inches now and run it here. Tight to the fence, stop, grab the push stick, change the position of my body, and push it through. Each time I'm pushing it all the way past the splitter on that other side. So if you're vertically challenged, you're going to have to really get close here to reach all the way across. Now it's your left hand that gets in danger on the table saw, so I don't want you to reach around, kind of like you saw me doing. That's why you need a partner to grab the stuff from the other side. Okay, here we switched up your view again. So as we look at our board here, we're cutting with the grain. That is making a rip cut. And the table saw in this class is primarily used to make these rip cuts on the saw. We can cut wider pieces where I can just use my hands. And the basic rule of is a 6-inch margin of safety is this slide, the miter slide spot right here. If I keep my hands beyond that, I can safely cut a bigger board. So we're going to demonstrate that on this bigger board from this different view where you can see that we keep it tight to the fence all the way through the cut. So we've got it set 16 1/4. I'm going to keep my hands back here, focus on the fence all the way through the cut. Just that easy. Two-handed cuts on the table saw are actually harder to do than just a single hand, but it's the same basic principle. Keep it tight to the fence. Make sure the longest edge is against the fence. Make sure you're holding the board at one time and you're pushing it all the way past the splitter. Now, if something weird happens in the saw and you can't push it through for some reason, like it just gets stuck, what do? You hold it. You hold it and hit the off switch with your leg or have someone else hit the off switch, but your job is to hold it as the operator so the saw doesn't kick back. And a kickback is when the board right here in this area will shoot off with a lot of force going backwards. It can actually do quite a bit of damage to anybody and the things behind you. So you have to control that board 100% of the time from the time you start the cut all the way through the splitter. So if something weird happens, you got to hold that board, turn it off, and then hold it while the blade stops. Now if that's happening, the blade's rubbing on the wood, it'll stop pretty quickly, but your job is to hold it and control that piece until the blade has stopped. So the table saw is a fun tool to use, and I'll be coaching you throughout this semester on how to use the table saw so you get very comfortable with using our table saw.